Welcome everyone for joining us tonight. I am Vennie Ho, Chairman of the Hong Kong Art Administrators Association. And I'm the Senior Director of Administration of the Hong Kong Philharmonic Orchestra. I'm the moderator of this first virtual live streaming talk, the Late Night Art Talk series, presented by the Hong Kong Art Administrators Association and sponsored by the U.S. Consulate General, Hong Kong and Macau. We are most grateful for their sponsorship to make possible this talk series of 4 talks on discussions about how the outbreak of the coronavirus impacts the art industry and how we as art administrators prepare to resume to normal post-coronavirus. It's my pleasure to host this talk with 2 prominent art leaders. We have from Hong Kong, our dear friend Tisa Ho, Executive Director of the Hong Kong Art Festival. Tisa also chairs the International Society for Performing Arts, ISPA, with its headquarters in New York, and the International Advisory Committee of the Tongyong Concert Hall in South Korea. Also, we have with us tonight speakers from US, Gail Crider. Gail is President and CEO of the National Art Strategies. NAS has a mission to build and support cultural leaders. Gail directs program design and facilitates organizational alignments and consult on strategy, leadership planning, and governance. Her wealth of experience covers a wide spectrum of areas, including theaters, philanthropy, education, and consultancy. The talk tonight will be about 1 hour. We expect to end at around 10:30 p.m. Hong Kong time, or 10:30 in the morning US East Coast time. During the talk, you will be able to see me and the 2 speakers on the screen. And if you have any questions to ask the speakers, you may leave your questions in the chat box. We will try to answer as many questions as we can during the Q&A sessions. We will record the talk and reserve the right to use the recording for future promotion or reporting. So without further ado, let me start with a question for Tisa. Tisa, you and your team spent months of time on probably over years to have the program line up and promotion and ticketing and everything. Some of your show for this year's festival were actually already sold out, and the coronavirus came all of a sudden, with a first case in Hong Kong announced on the 23rd of January, sort of right before the start of the opening performance of your festival schedule, I think on the 13th of February. So you made a very immediate decision to cancel the entire festival. So can you tell us how the tough decision was made and what are the impacts?
Thanks, Vennie. Hello, everyone. Hi, Gail. It was historic and memorable, and please God, don't ever have us to do this again. I think it began with the venues actually being closed, so we weren't sure that we would be able to get into the venues. And then there were a couple of our international artists who were worried about coming to Asia, because it really wasn't in Europe or the US. I mean, there was some talk about it, and the Lancet had written articles, but it wasn't widely experienced. But there was some anxiety, and so we looked at all of this, and we felt that we looked at the first week and what we could do in the first week, and then we looked at the whole festival, and we talked to some experts. We are very lucky to have a whole range of experts on our executive committee, and we did the scenarios, we punched the numbers, and we felt that the risk of going on was even greater than the risk of just saying we can't do this. Because as you progress in the planning, and as more and more happens, and as you know, already freight was arriving, right? And stuff was on the seas. People were going to get on planes. They were going to start rehearsing. So the later you made the decision, the worse it would be, because the deeper you were in this hole, right? If it turned out to be a hole. So you know, on hindsight, now that we're struggling with going forward, now that almost seems like the easy decision. It was really hard at the time because we would lose all of our box office. We would lose a good chunk of our sponsorship. We needed to pay people, and you know, we had a whole system in place about how much to pay and so on. But it was hard then. I feel today that going forward may prove to be harder. Maybe that's not what you want to hear, but you know.
Yeah, at that time you didn't even know if, you know, your loss would be taken care of, or whether or not it is now taken care of.
Yeah, no. We always knew, you know, I mean, we knew what how many tickets we had sold. We knew what that number was. We knew what we would have to give back to the sponsors, right? So we also have, I mean, we have a little reserve, so we knew how much we can bear and how much we wouldn't be able to bear, and how far it would deplete what reserves we had built over the years. So we knew where we were going to be. So very luckily, the government stepped in, and not just for us, but you know, quite quickly, I think, with funding to independent workers, through independent arts workers, through the Arts Development Council, with the Cantonese Opera Network, through the Bad War Association, with the Big Nine, of which, you know, Hong Kong Village one, and then they talked to us. So we haven't got our money yet, but we applied, and they said, look, you know, tell us what the where your difficulties are, and so that was very helpful. And also, and I have to say this, the Jockey Club was fantastic, so, and very supportive. So that made a huge difference. So we will be able to pay everyone, you know, and we will be able to survive.
Yeah, I'm actually quite impressed that the government come up with quite an immediate relief fund to help the sector. So yeah. At that point, we didn't even expect that the virus situation would be so far-reaching, you know, and prolonged period. How did you plan for rescheduling, or, you know, your next festival?
In February, second half of the year seemed a long way away. So in fact, we were hoping to do some things as early, now it seems early as June. So you know, it's not easy to reschedule a performance. Some of the international ones, we know that we would just have lost because they can't get up, and at that point it was still thinking, well, people can't just decide to come 3 months later because they have their schedules and you know, they have their work locked down. But it's now this thing has spread to much more places in the world, and now we're seeing in Europe, in the US, they're struggling with it. I think we were in a way lucky. We were early in the timing, so now we can start to look at recovery. You know, but we see our international friends and partners still really very deep in the middle of all of this.
Gail, what's the situation in US?
Well, it's good to see you, Vennie, and good to see you, Tisa. Thanks for this, and good to be here. It's, as you can imagine, it's quite different. First of all, so I lead a small nonprofit. We're based near Washington, D.C., so the kind of seat of federal government here in the U.S. And for NAS, like thousands of organizations, we're finding a new way of working. So I'm still working from home, as my team, as are many organizations across the US at this point. We're really finding that there's so many different constraints, and we even created a tree for social distancing life help us understand that each other's home circumstances are really different, and how might we have empathy towards that and build a work culture that's different online. So I can tell you in the US that the unemployment rate and joblessness are rising. We added 1.4 million to our unemployment numbers in March alone. Artists and freelancers have lost significant income as organizations have canceled seasons. So Tisa, not unlike what people experienced with Hong Kong Arts Festival. And it's looking like most are canceled through the summer. Some are now talking about canceling through the fall and the remainder of the year. Organizations have been shuttered for weeks now. So we're behind. The country mostly went into kind of this shelter in place around mid-March. So the organizations are furloughing staff and looking at longer term layoffs. Americans for the Arts has estimated that US organizations have lost $4.8 billion as a result of the pandemic. And without a federal mandate, each of our states can determine when to enforce and when to ease or lift the stay-at-home orders. So some states are coordinating with others and others are not. And so every day brings a new challenge for organizations and businesses. And information, I have to say, is overwhelming. I mean, it's flowing, but sometimes it's confusing and overwhelming here.
Can I jump in and ask Gail a question? Is it a very different experience between the major organizations and individual independents? Because you see the New York Met saying, we're in trouble. And I think we don't even see the smaller independent artists and organizations saying we're in trouble because they can't even get there.
Yes, I mean, part of it is that many of our organizations, especially the small to mid-sized organizations, have very little cash reserve. So they're in trouble faster, so to speak, having to make more significant changes more rapidly. And it's not that the large ones aren't making significant changes, they are, it's just the scale or the magnitude is different and the resources they have to draw on are different. We also saw a rush to flip every program possible to online. In some ways that's really good, but in other ways what was interesting from the perspective of small to mid-size is that the largers took up a ton of space without any kind of consultation. So if you think about, if you think about it changed the nature of how programs were being delivered and who had access.
Yeah, but well, my opinion is it also may, in the long run, may change the customers' behavior. And coming to live performances, it's a different experience.
Yes.
So in my view, digital performances cannot replace live performances in the long run. So
I would completely agree. I mean, there's a place for digital, but live is what it is, right? And in terms of orchestras, when the radio was invented, when cassettes were invented, when recordings were invented, people thought no more orchestras, but they're still around and still worth going to.
But I think in the meantime, it's a way of how we can still connect it with the audience and the community.
That's so true. Organizations are working as never before and finding ways to connect with their communities. And that social element, which is incredibly important. How do we think about both in the midst of this shelter in place that's still here in the US, how do people remain social? And then once we come back online and can open up, at least to some degree, what's that going to feel like for both organizations and audiences?
That's one of the questions that I think we're asking now, as well as when, because I think that when it's a finite period, you can work towards it and you can plan towards it. When you don't know when that light, when you will begin to see that light, I think a lot of us find it very disconcerting because we're we like control. We plan things, you know, we like to tie everything down, and we know we rehearse it. We know exactly how we're going to play that note, or at least how we want to play the note, how it ought to sound, you know, when people will be, when the curtain goes up, and all of this. And to deal with this level of uncertainty, I think is, frankly, I think it will take a toll. It would be very weird for us not to feel disconcerted in some way.
Tisa, I think you named it beautifully, and in all of its, how, you know, it's scary. But this is a time unlike anything else we've ever faced, and the horizon is very uncertain.
Gail, do you have any tools or advice how we should plan under this sort of circumstances and uncertainties?
Yes, I have some tools, and we can share a deck of that has links after this. So don't worry about taking too many notes, or I'm happy to share this. Also happy to talk with anybody who would like to reach out afterwards as well. I think the things I was thinking about, Vennie and Tisa, as we spoke in advance of the session, is that clearly we are living in more of a VUCA, which is a VUCA time, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And Tisa, as you mentioned, that we are feeling as humans particularly vulnerable because we don't have a clear endpoint. So in these times, we're really cognizant of the fact that arts and creativity play an even more important role in our societies. People need concrete visions for what the future is or could be, and the paths on how to get there. But how we get there is and what is that horizon is something that's quite changeable, malleable, especially day to day. So Tisa, I was as you were mentioning about how the Hong Kong Arts Festival planned initially in February, I think that's one of, you had two elements in there that are incredibly important in these times. One is scenario planning, and the other is risk assessment. And so as we think about how do we get from where we are now to where we might be, it's really, I think about three things to offer for consideration. The first is agile planning. The second is good decision-making processes. And the third is how do we keep anchored and sane during really turbulent times, emotionally and just, you know, psychologically and socially. So Vennie, do you want me to try and share the tool slides, or should we just?
Yes, please do.
Okay,
or Tisa, has any suggestion?
Yeah, no,
Tisa,
I just really wanted to say that one of the reasons I'm delighted that Gail has agreed to do this is that I benefited so much from participating in an NAS program, like, oh God, years and years ago. So fantastic network, but also I love the NAS approach, which is not to say what you should do. And we get a lot of this sometimes, you know, in training, like the arts should and you should, and blah, blah. I resent it when anybody tells me what I should. But what the NAS does is to have a whole bunch of tools that you can choose that will help you to frame the thinking. And I think some of this, as Gail says, some of this we do instinctively, right? Because you're struggling with what's out there. But having a framework and having it articulated so that you can at least begin to have a process of how you shape your thinking. I think that's fantastic. And those toolkits are wonderful. I think any arts manager needs to have those toolkits and to have new ones and to keep reviewing them. And I think even artists, if they're planning something, you know, you need these processes just to help you. And you don't have to use them all, but you know that they're there, and if they're helpful, then now I want to learn from this too. So I can't wait to see Gail's stuff.
I think, Tisa, some of these will be familiar to you, and right, you raise a good point, right? There isn't a single right path. There are many right paths, and so how, and many tools that you can use to get there. And so you might take a, you might need a wrench now and a screwdriver later, but to use the toolbox metaphor. But to have just a few things that help organize thinking, especially in moments where, I don't know about you, but sometimes I have those moments of chaos in my head, a little bit too many thoughts going on, right? And so to have some sort of framework to kind of, put those thoughts into and organize, like an organized closet of sorts. Yeah. I'm also just looking at the questions.
Slides, or
yes, I can do that, and we can. And then if y'all want to take a look at the questions too, we could jump to those. Let me share a couple of tools.
Okay, there's one about live streaming and whether we think this will affect audience behavior. Will they want to go back to concert halls and theaters, or think it's acceptable to sit at home and watch in front of the screen, and whether this will impact on ticket sales after after the virus is over? I think it's bound to impact. I think in addition to this habit, also how soon people feel safe. I think there was a study done, I think in Washington as well, that said that which showed that the percentage that were more ready to go back would be the people who went more in the first place. So the first people to rush to venues after we open them up are not likely to be new audiences. So I think that's probably why, and one of the reasons why we should think about, I think also, I just said the should word, but I think it's a helpful thing to do, to really to engage our audiences so that they know we're there, and then when we're back, and if they're looking forward to our being back, to walk that path together, rather than to say, okay, we're dark now, we can't do anything, you don't hear from us, and then ta-da, here we are back again. So I think one of the reasons that so many organizations are putting stuff online and live streaming is to maintain that contact, both from an organizational, institutional point of view, but also I think a lot of it also from a personal point of view. I mean, you just want to reach out to people right now. So I don't know whether that answers, or Gail and Vennie, you have something to add to that question that I'm just reading off the side.
Well, yes, I think oh, sorry, Vennie, please.
You go ahead. Gail,
Tisa, you raise again wonderful, thoughtful ways of thinking about this, right? Is that we have this human need to stay connected. How do we do that? And I think that the part of the challenge too is in the what can we put online that feels like, how can we be creative about what we put online? So for example, I'll use some of our bad examples here in the US, where people, I'll use educators maybe, but where they'll flip a class online exactly as they would teach it in person. That does not work very well. And so we have to continue to think about the medium in which we are communicating, and how we can build those connections, and where it's appropriate, or what works and what doesn't.
I was gonna say with all so many different organizations putting on digital online performances, probably it has to be something very special to attract the attention from the audience. That's also important, because there are quite a lot of choices now online.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. There's actually far too much for anybody to be able to watch. It's just, yeah. So yes, I think Gail, you mentioned this earlier, because the large organizations with large archives are able to immediately just put a lot of work out there. They are actually occupying a lot of the digital space and the bandwidth and the awareness, So it will get increasingly competitive. I think even the big organizations now, when they say, oh, we're putting another show on, it's getting less impact than earlier in this whole cycle. You need to work harder for that attention increasingly, I think.
Yes, and the resources, so we're finding that some of the large institutions are accelerating their digital plans. So because they have a capability that they can, that comes into play now. And interestingly enough, one of our board members from BRIC in Brooklyn has a filming studio. They have a lot of capabilities, and now they're thinking more precisely about how to open it up to small organizations and community-based people who don't have the same resources. So we are starting to see more thoughtfulness, perhaps, or even, even more thoughtfulness around alliances and partnerships. Vennie, would you like me to share a couple of tools now, or see if the screen will work? Okay, so let's go. Let's try. Give me a moment. If I can do this. All right. So,
nope, not
sorry,
seeing the.
You're not seeing it?
Nope.
Oh, I know what's, hang on one moment. It helps if I actually click share.
Right.
Aha.
Ah, there.
How's that?
Great.
I am still learning. Okay. So scenario planning, Tisa, as you mentioned, it was originated by military intelligence in the 1950s and adapted to business circumstances by Royal Dutch Shell and General Electric in the 1970s. And it's a way of looking at what's going on around us from different views. So it includes society, technology, economy, environment, politics, or STEEP, as the term is, in order to devise a flexible plan for the future. So there's not a single plan, it's more about an adaptive. Given the things that are going on around you and where your organization is and what its capabilities are, how it can navigate into a future. The reference that you see on your screen is, for a deeper dive, I would suggest taking a look at AEA's consulting's work in this area. They're a combination of really wonderful thinkers, from economists to arts, both performing and visual, and just a wonderful variety of great minds. And they've added creativity to the mix. So this tool really works well for individual artists as well as arts organizations. So for any scenario plan without a solid decision-making process will fail. So think about how you'll make decisions and what's the criteria and at what speed that you'll actually make those decisions. So you can use classic frames like the business model canvas to test ideas, the know, don't know matrix to determine risks, or even more current tools like WHOOP. And let me just show each of these as just examples. So the business model canvas is a strategic management template for developing or mapping an existing business model, or for testing an idea that you might have for a future model, given the nature of how things are changing. And it's a great visual because you can start to see if things balance or not, or if you have holes in your thinking, so to speak, or your logic. Something, Tisa, that you mentioned is almost a riff on the Johari window, or the know, don't know matrix. This particular one is a risk analysis. It's how we think about what we know and what we don't know. And so the theory and practice behind this is that there's things we're aware of, but there's things that we're aware of and we understand. There are things that we're aware of, but we don't understand them. There are things we understand that we're not aware of. And then the worst part is things that we're neither aware of nor understand, the unknown unknowns. And so these are things to think about as you test your scenarios about what is it we know, how do we know what we know? and what might we not know? And it goes to having, Tisa, I think you also mentioned on your executive board, having a variety of minds around a particular topic is useful. So it's not a single point of view. And then finally, kind of in the tools section, there's a funny new one called Whoop. And it's works for individuals or teams at any level. It's a simple tool where you can hone your goals, identify potential obstacles to achieving those goals, and then most importantly, create a plan to overcome those obstacles. And it stands for wish, outcome, obstacle, and plan. And on the previous slide, and I know Wendy will share, is a link if you would like to know more about how this might be applicable and useful to you. So I don't know if that was hopefully kind of helpful there in the tools section. Tisa, did I miss anything? Are there other, yeah.
That was quick. I'm going to need to come back and spend more time with these.
I think that's probably the best way. You know, in our hour here, I wanted to introduce some links and ideas that anyone could take a deeper dive into.
That's great. I guess the current situation is, you know, the virus is something that we don't understand, and it's a lot of uncertainty. What would happen the next day can have a, you know, sort of a sudden turn. So it's rather difficult to set a plan, so to speak. So I don't know, Tisa, would you be avoiding, say, for example, engaging big groups of overseas artists? How would your next festival's lineup be affected?
Well, we're talking to big groups of artists as well as smaller ones. So we have chamber scale work as well as large scale work. We're still in conversation at the moment, but the risks to us in Hong Kong at the moment are not only the coronavirus, not only the virus as it affects our partners outside. So that's one dimension, right? Whether they can travel, whether they can rehearse, whether they can come. The other dimension is at home, right? Maybe they can come, but then we have an outbreak or something like the beginning of the festival this year, where our venues are closed again and we can't do anything, right? So how do we? And then the third one is really, there's also, even before the virus started, we had contingencies in place, because do you remember there were a couple of days that the venues in Hong Kong were not open, not because of the virus, but because of action on the streets, because of, you know, things happening in Hong Kong, in the city. So that was something that it was, I'm not sure about understanding it, but it was a known. It was known that it does happen. It can happen. You don't know when it will happen. You don't know when it will happen, where exactly and how it will impact you. But so at that point, we already did a bunch of, well, you know, scenario planning. If this, then what? If this, then if. So and we're doing the same with planning for the next festival. And indeed also planning for some of the rescheduled work. So some of the work that we didn't manage to do in February and March this year, we're hoping to do later this year. So, but if then there's a second spike, if then what? So what is the contingency? So those two things are like a constant. I have not I've worked for so many years. I've never done so many risk analysis. Like everything you know, I remember years ago talking to a banker who does leveraged instruments, and was doing due diligence. No, a lawyer for a banker. So the lawyer was doing due diligence on a sponsorship contract that they were doing, and so we got to talking about the business model and how our cash flow works and how decision-making cycle works. And I remember at the end of that, he says, "You guys are serious risk takers." And I thought, he's working for, you know, one of these leverage banking financial people. He thinks of us as serious risk takers. So I think even in a normal way of working, there are these risks, right? There are the health risks, the travel risks. Artists are exposed to all sorts of risks. We plan things and then we sell tickets, and that's a risk. We don't know who will come, and there are things that you can do to mitigate, and there are things that you can do to kind of contain the risk. So I think those processes are things that we know to some degree how to do, but the risks have become bigger, the unknowns have become more significant, and so almost it's a question of scale, right? I mean, we've always canceling something in the festival is not a first. Somebody, a pianist has had an accident and can't play. Things happen. This is a risky business, but the scale of it, to have put the whole festival at risk, that's new. So and I think that is just a reflection. We talk about the arts reflecting life and what we do reflecting our communities. I mean, this also, we're reflecting what's happening in the world, right? I mean, people have been ill, there have been disruptions, there are things, but this scale, this level, this global, never before. So we're also responding to this. And if anybody says, the arts live in a separate, sphere of their own, like, no, hello, we're right here with everyone. So far deep in there with everyone. It's amazing. So very sorry, long-winded answer to your question, but as we plan, we are more aware now of the risk factors and paying more attention to being sure that we have some kind of scenario, if then what? If this company can't come, then what? If then what? I mean, some things we know because this is the business and we'll have done it before. But the scale and the magnitude and severity probably is something that we need to deal with. But we would like very much to maintain the balance and the personality of the festival. I know that some have said, I think Edinburgh, have said we're going to go we're going to focus on local work next year, and that there's very good reason for this. When international travel is an issue, and I think for some festivals, international audiences are also a big part of the mix. So I mean, at least that is not so much for us because we're basically here when we serve Hong Kong, and the audience is largely Hong Kong. We have some travelers, but not not to make or break what we do. So I think the other part of it, and Gail refers to this, is to become clearer about to articulate better to yourself at least what it is that you are and what you know, and that whole know don't know matrix, where the certainties are, if there are any, and where they really the uncertainties and the unknowns reside, so that you can at least have an approach of how to deal with them, as opposed to like be swimming in this whole morass of uncertainties and unknowns,
I think, Tisa, it reminds me of a neurological element of, neurons that fire together, wire together. So it's that thoughtful process that we can change, and that it's almost like rehearsal. If we rehearse different scenarios and then things present themselves in the environment where we know it's this play or that play or this play, that's incredibly helpful for the speed at which we can move, and also just the thoughtfulness that we've been thinking about it, and our brains are thinking about it in a little bit different way than ever before. I noticed a couple of questions I can pick up on, Vennie, if you'd like me to. The government and philanthropic funding in the US?
Sure.
So the NEA, our National Endowment for the Arts, which is our federal arts agency, has some additional money through the PPE. It's the programs that the federal government is putting out there for small businesses and others to try, paycheck protection, other things. The arts have gotten a fairly small amount of that. So the NEA is administering grants now that are $50,000 US dollars, but only for staff and facilities, but they only can go to grantees, people who've been grantees for the NEA. So that's tough. The thing they are doing, more broadly speaking, is that they have a resource page. They've collected or amassed a whole range of resources so that someone can go to that page and sift and sort what might be useful to them. Philanthropy is interesting. A lot of philanthropy, a lot of grant makers are unrestricting their grants. So instead of a particular project, they're allowing people to use it for general operating support, or they're allowing significant change to the terms of the grant, so that projects are, inevitably changing. And some are coming together in collaboratives. So the state of Illinois, the city of Chicago, and many of the local philanthropies in Chicago, inside of a week, created an emergency fund for artists and organizations, in Illinois. And Grant Makers in the Arts, which is one of our service organizations for grant makers who do give in the arts across the US, has initiated a panel. I think it's a coronavirus response, building the future we want. And their idea is that at some point, and this is going to be different for everyone, people will be able to pick their eyes up and move from crisis or immediate to intermediate to long term. And so how do they provide space and thoughtfulness around what could our future look like? Because as many have been talking here in the US, not all organizations will survive this. And so how do we think, instead of the organizations, but think about everyone as assets, and maybe recombining those in different ways towards something that's more equitable and serves, still serves communities and keeps the best of the best and maybe reinvents things.
How do the donors and sponsors react to cancellations and postponement of events? Are they being supportive always, or they become more passionate to give more to the arts?
Well, if I jump in with the festival's experience with our sponsors, they have unfortunately many of our sponsors are also facing a tough business environment. So this is something that we just have to acknowledge. It's kind of hard to say, please do more for us. And this is corporates, and they do have their shareholder responsibilities, their other stakeholders as well. So I think in order to keep that relationship so that they will come back and when the times are better for all of us, I think it's important to kind of remember that. So we have a fairly clear contract with our sponsors about what we do, what we get, when we get it, and so on. So it was helpful to have that very clear framework. So again, in a way, it's almost like the scenario planning, but enshrined in a contract, right? So if this happens, then this, then this, then this. So we kind of all knew where we were, and we had those conversations about, okay, this has happened, this if has now happened, so therefore this is the consequence, and we both all parties signed on to it, so there's no argument. But one of the things that has been so touching is the number of people who have said, I'm just going to donate my ticket, don't worry about the refunds, or I'll donate part of it. So that's just been amazing. That's just been phenomenally touching. I can't say enough about those people the people who've done that, and whether they've donated a whole bunch of tickets or one ticket, it's still they did want to do something.
It means a lot. It's their support, right?
Yeah, especially at this time, right? So I mean, I used to love when people book their tickets and they add something to the ticket, right? That I always felt was like an endorsement of the value. It's not like it's now not transactional. It's not like, okay, I buy the tickets, I come see the show, right? I buy the tickets, I love this, and I want to be with you and support, right? And now to have the donations back, that's just amazing. And not everybody can afford to donate it back. And and if somebody's people are in globally, but also in Hong Kong, lots of people are suffering. And actually, I'm conscious of the fact that when we start doing performances again, some of our core audiences will be fine. They've saved money from not going to holiday because they can't fly, but others may not have that much disposable income, and they will want to come and see the shows. And I haven't sorted out how, but I would like to be able to make that happen, and really welcome them back when we can do this. So, I've got sidetracked somewhere, but Tisa, our donors and our sponsors, how have they responded? Yeah, they've been very, very good most of the time. So, yeah.
Gail,
Tisa, I love. Thank you, Vennie. I love the perspective. I so appreciate it when you talk about empathy to others. What are others going through? How do you communicate consistency of communication? And what's our responsibility for, depending on where we stand and that the nature of the relationship. NAS made a decision at the beginning of this not to apply for any funding. We are going to exist on our funding. We have quite a large reserve, and there are many other folks in the US, many other organizations and artists that need money more than we do. And so we're committed to, in our case, doing programs, doing whatever we can for alumni, for participants, for program participants, at a pay what you will, which could be $1 or nothing, or free.
That's fantastic.
Okay, I think we have like 10 minutes left. Shall we look at some questions and try to answer some? Let's see.
There's this one on the impact of donations. I think that I don't know about you at the Phil, but I think we're all in for a rough time because the economic impact will be deep and long and strong.
Yeah, that's expected. So I guess we all have to reduce our fundraising target in the coming year.
Yeah. Yeah. And how without compromising the art and without making our staff suffer, without making cuts, how can we carry on doing the work and making that access? I think there's a lot of numbers to crunch for all of us, and not so much in our community, but there have been in the corporate world, people who have given up salaries, CEOs who have said, I won't take a pay for, whatever. And admittedly, these are people in positions where the pay has enabled them to say, I can live without my salary for a certain period, right? Which is not always true of people working in the arts. And that has also to be taken into account. But I think, wherever we can to help. And I think Gail and the NAS not seeking funding this year is just heroic. That's just amazing. It's beyond empathy. It's really a model of, if you don't need it, and in a way, this whole virus thing has made has caused thinking about what is it that we're about and what is it that we need, and is more always better, and is the way that we had been thinking. Is this the only way? Are there? I'm really hopeful that at the end of this, we will have found new ways of doing what we do and being clearer about what it is that we value, what's essential, and what's, maybe there are ways of doing this less resource intensive.
That's what I love about our industry, right? It's incredibly creative, not just what we put on stage or in museums, but the management and the leadership. And this is, in a weird way, an opportunity to be even more creative.
Well, here's a question regarding online behavior. Would there be differences between performers, artists, creators, and audience, say in respect of art form and means of creation, as well as of expectation? So, Gail, do you have any insight about this? Online behavior. Do you see any differences between different performances, different art forms?
Yes, I mean, I think we before we went live, we were talking a little bit about the various art forms. So you all perhaps have seen that many museums or zoos or aquariums have gone virtual. They put little cameras on penguins and walk them around the zoos, or the curators are now speaking, you know, to particular parts of their collections. So there's some theaters. Interestingly enough, there's a partner teams, people who are doing the same play from their homes simultaneously on given nights with, you know, donations. So there are things that can be kind of flipped. There's orchestras that are doing lullabies for families that want to tune in at night. Trying to think of, it's quite you know, there's poetry kind of slams or readings that are happening. But I think certainly some art forms, dance is particularly difficult. There's some where it was going to be hard to just keep up in terms of rehearsal and that camaraderie that comes with being together. But right now they cannot be. I don't know, Tisa, if you have to add to that.
Yeah, I think artists have a great advantage because they can just do this, right? I don't know about you guys, but I love the Yo-Yo Ma stuff. I love Ishak Perlman's online masterclass. You know, he just, I don't know who's taking the masterclass. He's just giving them, and he's giving you the finer points of fingering, and you know, they're just wonderful. I don't play the violin, but I love to watch them. So I think they have this enormous advantage. And one of the things that I have been frustrated with, in a way, at the festival, is that we don't own anything. Right, so the work that we present, the rights all belong to the people who put the work together, even the work that we commissioned and produced, because we don't keep the rights. So we don't have an archive that is copyright cleared. Unlike the Bolshoi, you know, they own everything. They can just push it out there. So there are some things we can't do, and I think that's where we need to think about other ways to stay in touch and you know, to make that network work for us. I think, yeah, and Gail's right. There's so many different ways from really individual kind of fun, and I love that lullaby thing. It's really thinking in terms of what it not only what I can give, but what the viewer might find of value. So that thoughtfulness, that mindfulness of not only yourself, but of that relationship, you know, I think that's wonderful.
Yeah. I think
Tisa, that might go to the, sorry, Vennie. That might go to the question that just popped up about corporations and sponsorships too. And I think, you know, it's what is the relationship we have and that's ongoing? How do we, you know, understand what's going on with our partner, with potential partners? How do we keep that relationship going until such time as we actually can potentially ask for money or there is more money available?
Actually, the one thing that is more difficult now to do, I think, is to make new friends and to reach new audiences. Because if they don't, well, yes, no, I don't know. Maybe if you have work out there and people who have not heard an opera or not heard Yo-Yo Ma will now go, because there's that access and there's this wider spread of information. So in that sense, yes. But one of the things that I've heard again and again and again is that this time, especially when people are in isolation, it's reaching the network, it's staying connected with the people that are in your community or your stakeholders. So I think we're investing in it with a business kind of like hat on, but also at a personal level, we're sort of feeling the need. I'm feeling the need to reach out and touch someone, be there, right? So because we are so isolated and so separated, so I think it may, in the longer term, change the nature of some relationships, will make them stronger. And if again, I think if they were robust, they will become stronger. If they weren't, then it might be harder to knit, to make stronger at this time.
Yes.
Do you see these online performances to be, a choice of entertainment, and then it might affect the ticket sales for live performances? How do you see about this?
I think there will be, I suspect that there will be some pent-up demand. We haven't had a concert, we haven't seen a show for so long, I can't wait to go and see the first one. But then there will also be some anxiety, and I think there are two ways of looking at the digital. One is, I have now seen this, I suspect more people have seen more opera if they're interested in it now than ever before, because they're all available, right? The whole repertoire. And so if there's an opportunity to see it live, there might be a greater willingness now to go, because you have this information already and you've had this introduction in a way. But will there be, will I want to just sit at home and watch this instead? I don't know. I hope not. Yeah, I think if there's any difficulty, I think that's been the experience for the HT live things, right? So that you watch this when you can't watch. You go to cinema and you watch this when you can't see the live performance. But then it makes you more willing, more interested to go and see the live when it's available. This is much more a US UK experience than Hong Kong, because we haven't been doing it so much. So I don't know, Gail. I remember doing a case study on the Met, and looking at the finances. So, but at that point, the jury was still out on what the results were going to be.
Right, the Met and the Kennedy Center that has a virtual stage they've had for many years now, and I think you might have mentioned this at the beginning. I think that there is no substitute for people physically getting together and wanting that and needing that as human beings. There is absolutely more availability of content online, and but there's so many different circumstances, parents trying to work from home, trying to homeschool, a variety of things that make that accessibility easier or harder. And so I think ultimately, not that we want to get away from our children, but there will be the craving for, once we can, to try and find a safe and, a safe way to get out and connect. And I think the arts are so brilliant at being able to do that.
I guess we can actually make use of these virtual performances as a tool of promoting the performances we are presenting. So now it's 10:30. So I guess we should conclude the session. Gail and Tisa, do you have any additional comments?
Oh, here's one. What encouragement do you have for performers in the short to medium term? Oh gosh, there are a few more now.
Yes.
Okay.
Around
Pick two more, okay? Tisa, you pick one.
Encouragement. Hang in there. Believe. What we do is unique, and those of us, I feel on an every day, those of us who are able to work in this are really, really, really privileged. So it's worth putting everything you have in it, making the sacrifices that you need to make, if it comes to that, to help to help what we do survive, you know, because the value to just human life is just so immense. And then use the tools and, you know, those practical things, but at the end of it, it has to be because this is so important and we want to so much, and then we will learn how to do it, I think.
Okay, one more question.
Tisa, I think there's a couple there that you might want to land on while you're looking at those just for a second. I think, yes, now more than ever, artists, performers, we need you. You are the life force, and yeah, and so believe in yourselves. We believe in you, and we know it's hard times, and we look forward to when we come through this together.
Okay, there's a very specific one for the festival. Do we need to scale down the team? How do you keep the team motivated? I have an amazingly motivated team. Okay, they really believe in this festival, so they're cheering themselves on, and I'm just saying, yeah, sure, go. You know, that's what it is. Beyond keeping the team, and I want to go back to a little bit about the government's funding. What is great is the government has provided us with the funds to be able to pay all of the contractors that we had lined up to help in the festival. So it's not paying ourselves, it's paying our external parties, and I think that's been really helpful. And there was somewhere else also a question about beyond helping the big organizations, what help is there for the smaller ones? I think the ADC has a whole bunch of schemes to help grantees. Probably, you know, we can discuss the size of the amount that each grantee can get, and I think individuals also, independent workers, independent contractors, independent people in the arts can also get that. And I think you know, like everywhere else, I think a lot of our artists do many different kinds of work. So they will be in performances, they will also teach, they will also, you know, that's also part of their income. And I think there was some discussion about looking at how to deal with that, the teaching part as well, whether it's through schools or through some other way. So I think there's an awareness of this, which is you know, I feel that it is being addressed. Share the role of as a leader, this ever-changing environment, balance and priorities. I think by aligning what is really important to all of us and having those strong relationships and having some difficult conversations. Some of those conversations right now will be difficult, because as Gail had said earlier, there is no one right way, and there may be a whole number of right ways and a whole number of maybe more risky ways. But it's the ability to talk and internally with the team to really bash it out, and with externally we can use a slightly more polite word, which is negotiate and persuade. So, but it is about communicating. It is about trying to get alignment of you know, and I think all of this, and it goes back to that question about encouragement as well. All of this is predicated on the idea that we believe and we hold firmly that what we do is important and is of value to society, to humanity, to the city, to everybody that we come and in touch with, so everybody who can benefit from the work that we do. So if you do this, if you have this, then if your sponsors, I mean, the sponsors are there because they believe this too, I hope, right? So that we give them value, and that there's value that we can give to all involved, including ourselves, in the work that we do. So that's why we will see our way through this.
Okay, I guess this sums up tonight's talk. A big thank you to Tisa and Gail for the very inspiring talk. we take home a lot of useful tips. Thank you for sharing the experience with us. And for the participants, thank you for joining us tonight. And please take a few minutes to complete the survey. It's very important to have your feedback. We will have 3 more talks of the same series coming up. So stay tuned to find the information on our website and social media platform. Thank you. And
Bye.
Thank you, Vennie. Thank you, Tisa.
Thanks, Gail. Thanks,
Honored to
Vennie.
be here. Thank you, everyone.
bye.